Yes, just thank you for checking me when I'm taking care of everybody.
Does quality of touch matter when you're on a date or hooking up? I'm Cathy Vartuli from theintimacydojo.com.
I'm Yoni Alkan from elementsofsexuality.com.
I'm Dr. Liz from sexpositivepsych.com.
I'm Caroline Carrington from Jewel in the Lotus Coaching.
I'm the token librarian who is off screen.
She's a sexy librarian.
Yes.
Sexy, sparkly librarian.
And so it's New Year's Eve, and we were having this great conversation while we're like...
Diana Fires 2016.
Yeah. And we wanted to capture some of these thoughts and ideas. And we were talking about how you were saying how the quality of the touch helps you indicate what you want to do. But I think there's a lot of people out there, I know I've dated some of them, that no one's ever helped them connect the dots. We're kind of expected, you just know.
Right.
You get a little education behind the bleachers in the 7th grade. Someone's reading. I literally remember the chorus teacher's daughter had one of those dirty books.
Oh.
It was like, romance book with dirty scenes in it, and we were all reading it and like trying to figure out sex. And I mean, that was the whole of my sex education besides the like the birds and the bees talk.
Yeah.
How do people know how to give higher quality touch?
Oh, don't worry, guys learn from porn, so
Yeah.
way better.
Well, and a lot of
We can make sure that
a lot of young women these days learn from porn too.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's
true.
The thing I've heard said by a lot of different sex educators is learning how to have sex by watching porn is like learning how to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious.
Yes.
And technically they're driving, but most people don't drive like that.
Hopefully.
And they acting in porn.
That's
true. Nobody has sex
They
in
get
those
they have
angles.
foreplay off screen.
Yeah. They have foreplay off screen.
Editing.
Having been to a party at Kink.com, right, when they have their upper floor parties, you get to see what actually happens when they're filming a porn. And there's all sorts of breaks that they take to, have a snack and drink some water, chat with each other, come over and say hello, right? It's not what you think it is.
You mean people don't just jump the pizza guy?
No, unfortunately. I mean, I've had some pizza guys that I would have jumped, but no, that's not generally acceptable.
So how do you define the quality of touch when you're being romantic or sexy with someone?
Well, in our previous video, I was actually differentiating between the intention behind the touch and the quality of touch. So for me, there's dead touch with touching without any intention.
Yeah.
It's just,
You put your hand on.
yeah. And it's just not going anywhere, and there's no finesse behind it. And when I teach, I'm talking to people about looking at how firmly or how lightly you're touching. I'm already putting sexual energy into that. I did not get permission before we started. To pull back.
Yes.
she's on record.
But do you want to talking about intention? Do you want to put sexual intention behind your touch, or do you want to put more of a mothering? I'm not going to pull the sexual energy. That's really hard with this beautiful being next to me. But you can put, when I'm with my students, sometimes what they need, even though they've come for a super sexy session with me, that isn't what they need. They need to be held and nurtured. So thinking about what the person needs or what it is you want to offer them, I think that really helps with the intention. And then actually going and learning how to touch somebody. Because you're right, nobody teaches you. We all just magically expect it to know.
And there's some really good classes out there, but I think the first thing is just to put your presence and your intention in your hands. As opposed to I used to always I remember reading a book and I've got to touch this way and I'm supposed to do this for 3 seconds and I was in here or up here.
Right.
There wasn't any presence. And then when you're just letting your fingers enjoy touching someone, it can be really sensual.
Yeah, I think for me too, when I'm touching, what I'm thinking about as well is what depth am I touching? Am I touching just the surface of their skin? Am I trying to touch a little bit deeper? Am I trying to give them a touch that goes all the way through them, right? That makes them feel seen and heard and held? And those don't necessarily have to be different firmnesses or hardnesses of touch. Because you can touch someone in a way that goes through, all the way through them with your intention without putting a lot of pressure onto their skin or their muscles.
Yeah.
Right. And we both do partner dancing.
Yeah.
And in it, one of the things that I loved learning was about the connection that you make. And basically you make connection with whichever body part that you connect with.
Yes.
It could be hands holding hands, but it could be shoulder to shoulder or whatever. And the idea behind it is that not only am I touching her back of her hand, she is touching me as well. And this is reciprocal. And if I keep just a dead hand, like not a dead, but like a stiff hand, then this doesn't feel right. We need to live and be. Yes, this is organic. We move against one another.
It's an interaction. It's a conversation.
Exactly.
You know, the same way that Cathy and I talked about kissing being a conversation, right, and being a dance. Touch is that same way. The way that you receive touch also impacts the way that someone touches you. We've all been in a situation where you touch someone and they kind of lean into the touch, and you can feel that they want that touch. And then the time where you touch someone and they're kind of like pulling away from the touch, and you can tell they don't really want that touch, right? Or they tense under your touch. And the way that they are receiving the touch tells you a lot about where they're at and how that interaction is going as well.
Yeah.
Something else that I find can be really fun to play with is there can be like you in the giving role and somebody else was receiving. But what if you blur those lines a little? Because so often we can be like, oh, well, it's their turn and then it's my turn. So we can give for somebody else's pleasure. But what if we dial into how good it actually feels as we're giving to somebody else on our skin? So even as givers, the quality of the touch changes. I'm enjoying this far too much for a video. The quality of the touch changes when I dial into how good it actually feels on my skin.
And when I let myself be fully present to the touch, it feels different for her than if I'm distracted. Like if you were to continue touching me while I'm talking here and paying attention here, and I'm distracted, it's not going to be the same for her because
I have to work harder.
She has to work much harder to distract me, right? To bring me out of that. And that's the same way a lot of people have had the experience where they're touching someone and it feels weird and they can't figure out why. And a lot of times it's that disconnect where you're not being present to the touch, or they're not being present to the touch, or you're coming at it with different intentions.
Or sitting there thinking, oh, I didn't take out the trash, and oh, I have to get the groceries, and
the mental checklist.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, both of you, different intensities of touch, but basically there are so many different variations on touch because it's not just hands. We have our whole body, each body part, hair, if you have facial hair, if you have head hair, every part of your body can touch, and you can touch different parts of the different bodies, again, depending on consent.
What you have consent for.
Of course. And then you can think about scratching rather than just light caresses or gossamer caresses.
Ooh.
Gossamer
Right?
I like that. I might find that.
For me. I don't know that word.
I will.
Gossamer from the foreigner.
So, gossamer from the foreigner. So, basically, butterfly touch.
Yeah, I like that.
Barely touch it.
I'm really glad we shot this video.
Yes.
I think I need to do over.
A do-over? Okay.
Just
But,
a little bit more.
what was that again?
I will say one more thing, though, that there's a huge difference if we touch skin to skin or if we touch over the clothes.
Oh yeah.
Or if we touch with wetness or with dry, whether it be
How much longer is this video?
The last thing I would say as well is that I think a lot of people don't know what kind of touch they like to receive. Because a lot of people have spent most of their life touching others to try to give that other person pleasure and not tuning into their own pleasure and what they like receiving. So an exercise I have people do in some of my classes is practice giving touch to another person where you're actively soliciting or giving feedback, right? Yeah. And what that does, as the person who is having to give feedback, who is being touched, is you have to figure out what it is you actually want done differently.
Tune in and pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Could you give an example?
So the way that I teach people to give feedback when you're the one receiving touch, if you're in the receptive role, is to start with something that's working, then tell them specifically what it is you want them to do differently, phrased in a positive way. So not what you want them to stop, but what you want them to do.
Because if you get too many stop doings, you can kind of freeze up and nothing's working.
Well, and if you say, stop touching me so lightly, does that mean stop touching at all? Does that mean use my nails? Does that mean massaging motion? I have no idea. All I know is what not to do, and there's a giant infinite level of possibilities. Yeah. So you need to be very specific. Your fingers feel very warm on me. I would really love if you touched me more slowly. Ooh, that's really lovely.
That's
Thank
really
you.
nice.
And then you give feedback, right? Thank them for paying attention to the change, right? And as the one receiving feedback, it's also helpful if you can remember to thank them. Because how awesome is it when people tell you how to make them feel good?
Honest. Yeah.
I also really liked how everything was language positively, but you started with an appreciation. That feels really good, and I might be using my own words.
Yeah,
it
sure.
would feel even better if you included X,
Could
Y,
we
and Z.
try?
Or could we try?
Yeah. And the nice thing is if you have like an experimental date, I love to encourage my clients to do that. Like just spend an hour. It doesn't have to be about orgasm, but it's about, oh wow, that feels really good. Just discovering, because you may not know what you like to do. I'm not as articulate when you're doing that. That's probably a good sign.
So I'll just pick this up and you continue. And say that, oh no, that will not go well.
He's gonna lose all words.
This is the mindfuck portion of the video.
So I will say this though, if you want to practice touch, you have professional cuddlers. I'm with cuddlist.com. You can go check it out. You have cuddle parties. Yeah, you can go. I'll soon be cuddleparty.com.
Yay.
Yeah, I'm working on my certification.
Yeah.
Go and cuddle with people with consent. Go cuddle with people and
Somaticas, people
Come to
dakinis, right? There are so many different professions that will help you practice your touch.
And you can practice that. The cuddle parties don't have to be sexual.
No.
You can be just enjoying the touch and learning about your body. And whether you're at a cuddle party or being sensual, I love to try playing with energy. Like you can do inhale and exhale, just like you would inhale your breath or exhale your breath. You can be like giving energy or taking it, like pulling it, or kind of gently pushing it into the skin. So you can play around with that and see what feels good to you. In different moods, I like one or the other, or mix or both.
And again, I think like learning how you like to be touched, learning how you like to touch is so helpful. Like the same way that everyone should masturbate, so you know what feels good on your genitals.
So you can tell somebody else.
Know what feels good all over your body.
Yeah,
You're going to have all sorts of erogenous zones and hot spots that you didn't even know you had.
And it makes you a good lover to be able to share with your partner, because most people want to know that they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And they probably want to please you. That's why they're touching you in the first place.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I bet that if I could ask each of you right now, wouldn't you love it if every person that you had sex with told you exactly what to do to have the hottest sex possible? Most of you would say yes.
And then you feel like a rock star.
Then you feel like a rock star, right? It's like you get the cheat code to their desire. So you have to know your own cheat code first.
Yeah.
I would actually love to hear from you guys what kind of touch makes you go, oh, like just shuts you off like Cathy, and I did. You go, continue the
Talk
video.
amongst yourselves. Thanks very much. Leave comments below.
Bye.